Welcome to Podcast Book Club from Lower Street Media, where we take a look at what makes great podcasts great. Our day job is making podcasts, but we're also fans of the medium, and we think it can be really useful to dig into what makes the shows we love so good. Today, we're going to be discussing Lateral, a podcast by YouTube superstar Tom Scott. Lateral is a weekly podcast that was first released in late 2022, and it describes itself as a comedy panel game show about weird questions and wonderful answers. Each week, Tom is joined by 3 guests who ask each other questions that have a sideways answer. Every episode is uploaded as audio to the various podcast platforms, and they're also broken up for shorter clips to YouTube. Only the first episode, The Elevator, Where You're Born Again, was uploaded to YouTube as a full-length video. And we're going to be concentrating on that episode today, but we're equally going to be discussing the shorter YouTube clips. You'll also see that we are channeling the spirit of Lateral today, and we're doing a video. My name is Zoe. I'm going to be your host today, and I'm a producer at Lower Street Media. As you can see, I'm not alone today, and I'd like to give my companions here a chance to introduce themselves. So you want to go first, Daria?
Hi guys, my name is Daria Lawson, and I am a junior producer here at Lower Street.
I'm Elizabeth. I'm the production manager at Lower Street.
And I'm Alex. I'm senior audio engineer at Lower Street.
Thank you, everybody. So let's just start off with broad thoughts about the episode and kind of just the clips and podcast in general. Do you want to start us off? What did you think? Yeah, what were your thoughts?
General thoughts. I'd never seen or heard the show before, and I really like game shows. I had no idea that there was like podcast game shows out there. It was fun. Fun to try to play along, and you also said about the video clips.
Mm-hmm.
I liked them. I feel like I don't want to get too deep into it yet. It's definitely a unique expansion of, I feel like it kind of maybe cheapens the subject.
Interesting.
But we'll get into that more.
Okay, let's put a pin in that one.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, what did you think?
Well, this was my first time listening to Lateral, and I thought it was a really fun concept, good personalities on the show. I also am not someone who watches a lot of podcasts. I am purely a podcast listener because I like to multitask while I listen to podcasts. So it was a very different mindset for me sitting down to watch with full attention a podcast when I'm generally moseying around the house while I listen. And I found it easier to connect to unknown voices right away when I could see their faces and expressions and watch them banter with each other. But I did ultimately feel like the video didn't necessarily add a ton to the storytelling of this particular podcast. Not that it's a story-based podcast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think I'm more a fan of this one as an audio podcast. I didn't feel like visually it added a ton for me, but fun concept.
Okay. Interesting. And what did you think, Alex?
It's interesting. This was like almost a nostalgic listen for me. This felt like something that would have existed on the internet like 5+ years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's because Tom Scott's hosting it and it feels like he's been online forever, or whether it's because of the format. It's very niche and nerdy and kind of low budget, I think.
Yeah.
Which is something that a lot of media on the internet, I think, is less and less so nowadays. Like the production values tend to be a bit higher. But overall, I thought it was pretty good. I'm not sure if I'd go on to listen to more episodes myself, but I did have a strong feeling throughout the whole thing, both listening to, so I listened to the full episode and watched the full episode. I didn't get into many of the clips, but I did get a strong feeling whilst listening to it and then watching it that there's like a small subsection of people for whom this show absolutely slaps.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's me, but they're
Yeah, I think you would know if it was you. I think there would be a vibe.
You might have gotten deeper into the clips.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, it's interesting. So I first came across this show through the short clips. I didn't actually realize it was a full either video or audio like podcast. I just thought it was sort of a YouTube shorts thing. And I do really like the shorts. I like the full length video, but I can absolutely see why they've turned it into shorts. Just the nature of the show, like the short questions and like these little sections, it really makes sense actually for what the content is to have it like that. And it's interesting that I'd like to talk about the fact that they never did a full video episode again. They just did the one. I imagine to test it out and see, you know, if it worked and maybe something didn't work. And what was that, you know?
I have thoughts.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you have thoughts. Imagine if you didn't. Were you going to say something, Alex? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say that for a lot of video podcast content on YouTube, the clips do far better than the full episodes do. I think this is especially true for like the big shows, even something like the Joe Rogan podcast, which just feels like it's absolutely everywhere. It's the clip channels and the clip channels for the clip channels that actually drive the majority of the views for them. So I think from like just a reaching as many people as possible perspective, clips are ideal. And then also what you said, Zoe, the show, it feels like it really lends itself towards the clips. And actually, in my opinion, the weakest part of the full episodes were the transitions between the questions. So actually just having them as standalone things probably get more views and it'll probably play more to the strengths of that show, I think.
I did not dig into this show's social media persona at all either, but I would bet money that those clips make good reels and TikToks and translate really nicely to that medium. There's a lot of filler in this episode. It's quite long, but each of the questions with the quippiest answer would make great content for flipping through reels. So that's my hunch of why the long full-length episode did not translate to audiences, but the clips are making it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're 100% right with that. It's definitely a very social mediable, I don't know, piece of content. And absolutely, they do use it on Instagram, on all those kind of things. So you're absolutely right.
I liked the clips. I generally like watching YouTube shorts, but just because they're short, just for like quick entertainment purposes. And I felt like for a show that it's really the subject matter is about the process of what's being discussed. And the shorts really cut that whole process down. And I thought that really reduced the theme of the show. I know that it's probably helpful having the shorts anyway and driving people from the shorts to the show. But I feel like it really subtracted value in the actual show theme.
Oh, and because of YouTube naming conventions, when you say shorts, do you mean the clips are like the YouTube shorts?
YouTube shorts.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I always get them confused because they have the clips of the show, which are shorter versions of the full show. And then you have the shorts, which are shorter versions of the clips.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's complicated.
I'd just like to pick up, I know a few of you have mentioned already, but do you have a preference in terms of full audio, full video, or the clips? What do we prefer generally?
See, I can't speak to the clips because I don't really watch many of them. I think the full video was probably slightly better. If we're going to leave things unchanged, then probably the video, because a lot of what came across as slightly disjointed, like pacing and back and forth in the episode, listening to it audio only, made loads more sense when you had the video, because you could see people like thinking or like making facial expressions, or like you could see the cogs turning.
They've lined up a very famous bit of a very famous painting with the elevator button.
Now, what is a painting that has a conspicuous circular possibly arrow-shaped feature that could be replaced with a button to call an elevator?
For me, because this type of show, I prefer to listen to half-heartedly. These kind of like winding conversation shows that aren't like storytelling shows or journalism shows. I prefer to kind of have an ear on while I'm doing something else too. So definitely I prefer the audio version because the pauses and gaps don't bug me as much when I'm listening to it on an audio, because I feel more like I'm just like listening in on a group of friends having a conversation than that I'm focusing all of my attention on watching a presentation. So I think my buy-in is different when I'm listening to it on audio versus when I'm watching the video. And I have like way more patience for the pauses if I feel like I'm doing the same thing, kind of like weaving in and out of the conversation. I do feel that the audio podcast could also be strengthened with some editing.
Yeah, I'd like to get around to that in a sec. But Dara, do you have a preference? I guess maybe the clips for you, the shorter.
Well, in terms of like the video or audio, just that, I preferred the audio too. I didn't find that there was much that the video added. It was just conversation. It was just thinking through speaking. So that's why I liked the audio. I actually really liked the clips where they're like 5 to 7 minutes, because you did still get a bit of that like thought process and it wasn't as quick and rushed as the shorts. So yeah, there was a little bit more like meat to the video clips.
Interesting. Yeah. For me, because it's funny because I came into it via the clips and was like, well, this is a very good idea. But I do think that's still my favorite, but it does steer you if you're interested in, what's being said. You can go over to the full audio version and get more of a fleshed out conversation, which is actually quite a prudent idea in many ways.
Yeah, I also wonder how much overlap there is between those two audiences, whether they have people who cross that barrier at all, or whether they just have video watchers and audio listeners, and that's kind of it. Because personally, I'd pick one and stick with it, I think.
Yeah, I can't say, I don't know if I necessarily would have gone to the full audio version if we weren't discussing it. I think I probably would have stayed just with the clips, because it's that kind of mindset thing, isn't it? Where just because you're on YouTube, it doesn't mean you want to go and listen to a 45, because the episode's quite long, a 45-minute podcast. So yeah, I get that the audiences might be different.
I'd be curious to know which one they consider their main vehicle, really. Like, because my hunch is that the clips are the main product that they're driving towards here, and the long form podcast is a good way to collect the material for those clips, and then also might as well throw it up.
Yeah. No.
I did notice, I wondered, the audio podcast, I didn't notice when I was watching the video, but maybe this was present there as well, and I just noticed it in the audio. They have some like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire music playing.
Yeah, that's in the video. That's in the full-length video too, and
I didn't notice it at all in the video, but it really stuck out in the audio version. And I wonder why that was. It's kind of corny, but still in a fun way.
All right, it's back to me for the next one, and it goes something like this. Putney Bridge in London is unusual in that it has a church at both ends, All Saints on the north bank of the Thames and St Mary's on the south bank. How did that come about?
I wanted to pick up on something that you said, Alex, about the video version of it feeling like maybe a little bit lower budget or like not as polished as other things that are maybe out there. I wondered if you could expand on that a little bit. What do you mean?
There's a lack of consistency, I think, between the guests. Also, they probably just don't necessarily have the equipment, which is fine. And this is a podcast which, knowing Tom Scott's stuff, it's like him and his friends.
Yep.
So if you're making like a show, and Tom Scott obviously likes game shows, or from what I understand, is that he likes game shows.
I know Tom Scott, and I know he loves me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know him, and I know that.
He's doing something he enjoys with his friends. So I don't know if it makes a huge amount of sense for him to be like, well, I'm not going to send you a camera. You need to buy blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's slightly lower budget. It kind of almost feels like you're peeping in on like a friend's game night or something. Aside from Tom Scott being in like 12K Ultra HD, like almost weirdly sharper than everyone else on that show. But yeah, it's just that the consistency isn't quite there, which, I mean, I think from our point of view as people who make like branded podcasts, that'd be a problem. But if you're basically making a game show with your friends, then I think it's totally fair. And then my final point, which is completely unrelated to what we've said so far, is Tom Scott's boom arm for his microphone. And I think for one of the guests as well, it comes into the shot, it then goes down at 90 degrees, and then the microphone comes out at 90 degrees again. So it's like there's this whole central half of the image that's just like blocked off by the boom arm. And why wouldn't you have it like
over there
coming up from, I don't know. It's very strange.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
On
the sort of consistency piece, so maintaining the audio and video. Is that something?
And here's the time where I admit that I watched the first 20 minutes and then I just...
I mean, you would have got a flavour for it. I mean, did you notice a real disparity between Tom's audio visual and the guests?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty hard to ignore, and I like what you said about like it's just hard to expect. Tom, who does that like professionally for a living and is so used to it and has done it for ages. And then just inviting someone on. Just sort of like at bare minimum, you'd hope they kind of position their camera like in front of a relatively scenic background. But yeah, just sort of those simple things that can just up the quality like that much.
Yeah, I think for that Australian Cup as well, like more light, maybe. They just seem much darker.
Yeah, I mean, the big caveat I would give to this is that all of the people in the podcast are either podcasters or YouTubers. So it's not just like his friend. I assume they are his friends, but they're like his YouTube friends. So if there was any group of people that would have access to good microphones and maybe good cameras, depending, it would be them. So I think it's probably a show that's got a fairly good shot maybe a bit later down the line, because that's the first episode as well that we looked at.
When did this podcast come out? Because it had real early pandemic vibes to it.
Yeah.
It really felt like we've all been locked in our homes for 4 months and we're going to hop on Zoom. And
do a pop
it had
quiz.
that, I think this goes to the consistency piece of the video, but it had the quality of like early pandemic Zoom calls where no one quite knew how to use the technology they were working with. And I was so sure that was the time period. So it's kind of funny to hear it's much later than that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it was late 2022. I think we're all going to get flamed by Tom Scott. This is not going to get any edit, by the way. Interesting. So you mentioned editing, and that fact that it could benefit potentially the longer versions from a bit more editing. Could you expand on that a little bit?
So the podcast is called Lateral, right? And I think I hoped for more lateral conversation and less like chatter after we know what the answer is.
Yeah, I think it is something that potentially is corrected by the clips. So the kind of some of them where that kind of chatter about, this is how all of you got to the answer is kind of in there, but there's not as much of it. But it's almost like, I don't know, being a bit more dear with what you keep in will maybe make it a richer experience, right?
I agree with you. Some of the conversation after the questions have been answered can go. And then also, I put this down as a point here. There were no points, which I feel like kind of robs a game show of like a lot of its like motivating, I don't know, essence, whatever it is. You're competing for points. So I feel like that makes it adds a little bit of urgency. It makes it a little bit more brisk to listen to. So like just shortening up the post-answer conversation and having some points as well, I think would make it much more interesting.
I also think if there were points involved, and the point system doesn't need to make any logical sense, right? The point system can be randomly assigned points based on how much I liked your answer, which
Like
it kind of should.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
That would make a case for a video podcast of this show, because if you're watching a scoreboard, I care so much more about paying attention to this video podcast.
Yeah. And you're also playing along, you're getting points as well.
Yeah.
So there's an element of comparing yourself to the people playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kept saying in the episode, like, oh, you know, we're not doing points, and it's kind of like poking fun at it. And I was like, just like, why not?
If it ain't broke.
No, we need points.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. And kind of moving into our own world of branded podcast, I wondered if anybody had any kind of learnings to share, essentially, from how the production is done, or things maybe we could do differently.
I think the precursor to all this should be to say that, like, for all that we've said about this podcast, it feels like something that's ideal for its intended audience.
Absolutely,
like, if you go to the comment section on any of the videos, everyone's having a whale of a time.
Well, that's nice.
But just from our point of view, like, just shorter, bit more consistency in terms of the video stuff. Some points, I mean, like you guys were saying, they don't have to mean anything, but they're just a great animating force behind it. And yeah, I think as well, if you're doing like a podcast and you want an excuse to talk to other people, getting them on your game show is great.
It's a good idea,
you know?
yeah.
Especially like when the more you talk to people who are involved in like capital B business or whatever you want to call it, there are a lot of type A competitive people that I'm sure would love to be on a game show.
From an entertainment perspective in branded podcasting, I have been thinking so much recently about the relationship between the host and the guests on episodes, particularly interview episodes, and gamifying anything is such a great way to naturalize that relationship and make it feel less formal, more fun. You see a side of someone that you don't see on every other podcast that they're guesting on. So I think that is definitely something to learn from this, that forcing people to think a little differently than they're used to thinking while they're on a podcast goes a long way to seeing more genuine personality from them and probably learning something more about them than is out there. So definitely shifting that guest-host relationship.
And I think as well, if you have, like, you can still use guests as sources of information, but maybe you can get that information via, like, the questions they ask or something like that would be interesting, rather than being like, let me ask you a question about something I don't understand.
Right.
They can ask the host a question about something maybe the host doesn't understand and kind of take it from there. That might be a little bit more interesting. Because I do like the idea that even though Tom Scott's the host, like the question answer kind of shifts throughout the episode. They're all asking each other questions, which I like.
Right.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I feel like if your guest is an expert on something, this is not what Lateral does, but in that same stream, if your guest is an expert on something, you don't need to ask them questions about how they became an expert on that thing.
Right.
I think thinking of ways that they can show that expertise via the audio medium is arguably more interesting.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. I'm really glad you said, Alex, about potentially having like just, I don't know, people in business or just different kinds of guests. And it's fun to do it with your friends, I'm sure. But just to extend that would be, a great opportunity to like humanize maybe some business owners, or just get the personality of brands out there. And great advertising. Maybe if they're going to do something that's a game, they could, like, I don't know, compete to donate for something. And I think that'd be super, super advantageous for brands.
And I guess one final question. It's difficult to maintain quality in a remote setup, right? So, you can send out mics, that kind of thing. But having like good quality video is an issue. And I wonder, would maybe the quality of Lateral have been improved if it was in a setup like this, right? Where everybody's sitting together versus everybody joining in remotely. And is there a way to boost the quality remotely?
I think to your first point, almost certainly it would be better if they were in person. If they were in person and on lower quality equipment than Tom Scott was on, but it was just consistent across all of them, I think that would be better. And then for doing stuff remotely, it's really tricky because it's not something that's crystallized as like a surefire way to get good video. I think more and more we're seeing now you can like use your phone as a web camera or cameras as a web camera, but it's just difficult. And I think it's one of those things like a few years ago, the idea of all remote guests having a microphone of their own was like a bit weird, but more and more that's just the way it's done. So hopefully cameras can be the next frontier on that, which is a very roundabout way of me saying, I don't know when it comes to the video side of things.
I do think most people's camera phones are higher quality than their webcams, their built-in webcams now. So having a setup where they can use their camera on their iPhone is probably more ideal. But yes, of course, I think if they were all in person, not only would it have been consistent quality, but I think the video would have been more entertaining to watch because you would have had some of, like, it's a competition, right? So you get some natural dynamics when you're in the room with someone you're competing with that you don't get when you're over Zoom, right? You're going to see more back and forth. I mean, yeah, I'm sure more people would be like jumping on each other. We've all adapted a real politeness on web calls where we, take turns, which is nice, right? Like that's a good thing to do, but it's a little bit more pronounced than it is even in normal conversation when you wait for someone to finish speaking, just because the internet lags or you don't know who's going to go next. We have more natural cues with body language when we're in person.
Yep.
I think on that quiz as well, there was whole bits where they're trying to explain like the direction of the pointing of Michelangelo's David. And like if you were in person, that would be so much, Yeah. I feel like that would be so much more frictionless.
I think that's a fair comment. Well, thank you everybody for discussing Lateral with me. I wondered if anybody had any final thoughts they wanted to share. It could be about anything at all that we've spoken about.
Yeah, I suppose it would be to say that I did like it. It's I meant nostalgic in a good way at the start. Like it's quite comforting. And I think a lot of the kind of issues that I had with it just stem from, having the editor's brain all the time of listening to things and constantly being like, how can it be shorter? How can it be shorter?
Right. Yeah.
But this to me feels like an enjoyable show that was really geared towards a certain kind of audience that Tom Scott already has. And I think a lot of the stuff we've talked about is like how interesting it would be to like adapt that show for something else, I think. Even though there are obviously little improvements that could be made to the show itself, it's just, I feel like it's an underutilized format of show, like game shows, I think. But yeah, that's me. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
I feel like this format of show, which is not defined by a narrative arc, not even in a point system that leads to an eventual winner,
right,
lends itself far more to the short form video content than the long form video content. I think without the arc to watch from beginning to end, it's harder to maintain attention for a full 45-minute video, and the shorter clips that, match the format of the podcast make more sense and are more bingeable. I think it would be easier to watch that podcast in, 8 separate 5-minute clips than the one full 45-minute clip. So that's just interesting to note. And then, yes, game shows, underutilized format, and any way that we can rethink how we get people to connect with each other is good fodder for new podcasts, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, that's such a great point about the story arc. I think if there was points and there was like some sort of like great
Stakes.
build up at the end, there would just be a really, really simple natural arc. So yeah, I would like to see points still implemented, but yeah, I think going away from it, just the main thing is just editing it down. I feel like doing chores or just doing things around the house, you could easily listen to like a few like 20-minute episodes of that and just be thoroughly entertained, but it just kind of dragged on a bit for me. So yeah, definitely benefit from just some structuring generally.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for listening. This has been Podcast Book Club. If you've listened, we'd love to know what you thought about Lateral, if you've seen it. You can let us know, and you can find us at Lower Street on Twitter at The Lower Street. And we'd also love you to hit follow in Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you'll see you for the next episode of Podcast Book Club with a new show, a new host, maybe video again sometime. Who knows? Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.